Okay, well, welcome to another episode of the Rest and Recovery Podcast. And with me is Hope Pedraza. I hope I pronounced that right. I didn't check before we went live.
It is.
I probably should have done that. She's a Certified Holistic Nutritionist, Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Practitioner, which I want to get into talking about, Pilates instructor, and you have your own podcast as well. So, Hope, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Scott.
Yeah. I think it's fun with the positives on the internet as much as we talk about some of the negatives around things, but to be able to connect with people like yourself and finding like-minded and learning, especially in the space of health that's been certainly amplified the last few years, but was really a key ingredient or issue that we've been addressing for years and still have a big problem. But I think if there's anything that's been learned recently, I think it's amplified the need to focus on things and not just be mindless about our walk in life on health. And obviously there's a lot of levers to that. But before we get into kind of some of that, what's your background on how you got to become a nutritionist and why this health space?
So my journey kind of started first with the Pilates world. You mentioned that as a Pilates instructor. So my background is in dance, and I danced for however many years of my life. Okay. And that kind of led me into the world of Pilates. I probably started taking Pilates when I was in high school. Like, in the 90s, I go to the gym with my mom. We do like step aerobics and all the things we did in the 90s. And so I started doing Pilates then. And then when I got into college, I started teaching it. I did some certification courses and started teaching it just as like a side gig. And I loved Pilates I just loved the fluidity and the precision, and it went so well with my dance background, but I just loved how it made my body feel. And so it kind of brought on this like fascination with the human body and how the human body worked. And so I kept teaching that and dancing through college and out of college, and was presented with the opportunity to open up a studio. I actually bought a Feeling Yoga studio and turned it into my own and rebranded that whole thing. So when I opened my studio, I was already I was into nutrition just like for myself, just for my own, gain, I guess.
Sure.
And when I was mostly women. I mean, we don't only teach women, but it's mostly women that come through our doors. And so I'd hear them talking to each other, they're doing this diet, they're doing that diet. And I'm like, no, like this is not right. This is not how you do things. So I wanted to be able to provide the ladies in my studio with the, just at least like a foundational level of nutritional support and guidance, like actual facts instead of like fads or what they're learning from their neighbor or whatever. Yeah. And to be able to provide that for the ladies in my studio. And then from there, as I started learning, I did an initial certification course, and I wanted to learn more. Like I wanted to dive deeper. I wanted to know more. I wanted to be able to serve them at a deeper level. And so I ended up doing some more programs. I did a 2-year diploma program for my holistic nutrition, and then did the FDN-P certification. And that eventually kind of branched off. So now I have like my online nutrition business and then my brick and mortar. But it really just grew out of me just wanting to serve at a deeper level, and then wanting to be able to just provide as much service and valuable guidance as I could just for everyone in their nutritional journey, their wellness journey.
Well, I think that's huge. It's funny, the amount of people I've interviewed and had conversations with, it seems like a very similar genesis is like we started with our own health, and whether it's improving it or we had some kind of, lack and have issues. But we always end up going down the rabbit hole. It seems like.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. Well, and I think that was the other part too, is I did grow up with a lot of like digestive issues. I was in and out of different doctors and colonoscopies and endoscopes and like you name it. I had all the things when I was little. And so I think that was the other part too, is, going through that myself. And as a kid, it's a little traumatic as a kid, going to all the doctors and stuff. And so like recognizing, as I grew up and started educating myself and reading for myself and being able to kind of heal my body. That was the other piece too, where it's like, I have this other piece too, where I'm like, okay, I know the value of like, healing your body with food and the right things, and, to be able to provide that for people as well.
Yeah. I think that's such an important piece. In at this point, it's weird because we've gotten so far removed, it seems like, and so lenient on the allopathic method of healing that we've lost sight of what got us to this point. And it's not to invalidate
Sure.
oncology or anything like that,
Yeah.
but it's a very specific
Yes.
niche that it covers.
Right.
There's like 98% of the rest of our health that's not being addressed. And
Yep.
we plural, I think culturally have blown off food as medicine.
Absolutely. Yep. 100%. Yeah.
So go ahead. You were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I just think as a society, I think it all goes like, we're all looking for like the magic bullet and the quick fix. And it's like, that's what turns us away from, like you're saying, like how it was originally intended, which is food as medicine. So yeah.
Right. So in your journey and as you heard from women, how do you help guide people to discern what is fact or fiction, or perhaps maybe that personalization piece to discern that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My general motto, I guess, in life is like, it's bio-individuality. Like there is no cookie cutter, one size fits all. Like there's like, doesn't exist. And so that's kind of the perspective that I take is, if you've done something that's cookie cutter, like, you have a little success for a while, but it's probably not going to be a long lasting success because it wasn't made for you and your body and how your body functions. And so, and that's really what I love about the functional diagnostic nutrition program that I did was it really helps you to like hone in on the body as an individual. And we look at like functional labs and screenings and stuff and interpret those to help the person get to the root of the problem is the whole like premise of it. But
Right.
It really helps bring in that like individualized piece because again, like, doing a one size fits all thing or, doing the try the fad diets and all the things like that, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to be what your body needs. And so that's the perspective I take is that, it has to be individualized to the person and, to their individual needs and how their body works and just where they are in life. And that's the only way that's going to work.
Yeah. And, I've been using a good example is, we talk about nutrition and certain foods are considered high quality proteins like egg and peanuts. But at least in our house, both of those can be very detrimental to two of my daughters.
Yeah.
To the point of anaphylaxis. So It's like you've got this completely diametrically opposed facts.
Yep.
Those are great proteins.
Yes.
But it may
absolutely
put somebody in a bad spot.
Absolutely. And I actually went on a rant about this on Instagram a while back because I had, people, I see things or people comment things and I'm like, no, because that's the thing too, is it's like, you can't make a blanket statement about anything.
Right.
And you're right. And peanuts and eggs is such a good example because eggs and peanuts can be super healthy for some people. And it's not for others. Just like, I know gluten is, it's villainized a lot of ways and it's really bad for a lot of people, but it doesn't mean it's everybody reacts to it. The same thing with soy or with dairy, like everybody is different and everybody's going to react to different things. You really can't make a blanket statement about anything like that.
Yeah. It seems almost most things, as long as it's not a moral issue, but it's a degrees discussion at the end of the day.
Exactly.
You have a certain level of sensitivity, like the FDN-P. I know that, one of the tests, I'm actually in the process of that myself right now.
Awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah. And, one of the food sensitivity tests is just really understanding to what degree.
Right. Exactly.
And then from there, you can make better decisions.
Right.
And really that bio-individuality or prescriptive.
Yeah. Well, and then knowing too, that like, it's not forever for most things. Now, granted, if you have like celiac or like if your kid is you're allergic to peanuts, obviously you're not, but for most things, it's not forever. Like when you do these food sensitivity tests, a lot of people think it's like the be all end all, like, oh, well, now I can't eat any of this stuff ever again. But those things change over time. And it's depending on like, the stress response that's going on in your body and how inflamed your body is, you might be sensitive to a ton of things right now. Well, once you, take the right steps to lower the stress response and get the inflammation down your body's going to react differently to this food. So it's not like, a death sentence, those looking at, what your body's sensitive to at the time.
Sure. So when you're dealing with clients as a health coach and FDNP, do you, most medicines, they don't prescribe this, but I think it ought to be, is you prescribe Pilates, or do you prescribe, fill in the blank.
Yeah. So, I kind of the same way as nutrition. I kind of use the person. It's kind of individualized that way, but and two, it also depends on, what's going on in the body. I think that's the important thing to note too. Movement and exercise is always part of the protocol, like 100%.
Yeah.
But it's just, what movement and exercise is it? For somebody who's like their adrenals are like in the toilet and they're like barely functioning, I'm not going to ask them to go, do a HIIT workout or ride your Peloton tonight. Like it's not going to be
Right.
something that's, they're going to be like, hey, let's walk, let's do some yoga, like let's do it slow. So it's going to depend on the person. As far as Pilates, and of course I am biased, but I love Pilates, and I do think it's such a great movement modality for everybody. And even if it's not something that you're doing, like you're a diehard, I'm going to do Pilates 7 days a week, like even just implementing it, whatever you're doing, which is why I love it so much, because it's so functional. I mean, it's a good way to, cross train other things. You're a runner, you're a biker, you're a swimmer. We have football players that come to us. Like it's such a good cross training method because, they get on the machine and they're working those little stabilizer muscles that are helping with agility, or, they're working on their tight hips because they're sitting on their bicycle for 5,000 miles or whatever, so it's just a great modality for everybody because it's working the core, it's working flexibility, it's working stability and balance and proprioception and those little stabilizer muscles. So I can't say that I technically like prescribe it to everybody, but it is highly encouraged. And I do, like, as a part of my program, I do give like the virtual membership to the people I work with, so they can get in a virtual membership and they can do Pilates and stuff. Because, well, the other thing too is it is a low impact class, and it's typically a low intensity class, so it pretty much is good for everybody.
Okay.
And the other part incorporates is the breath work, which I find a really important part of the healing process, and which is something else I like I said, prescribe for the people I work with, is doing breathwork practices. And because Pilates incorporates, a lot of breathwork in it, it really does. It's like, it's multifaceted in that way.
I didn't realize it incorporated that. So that makes me think, and you kind of probably touched on a number of it. Maybe what's the 101 definition of Pilates for those who
Yes, I should have started with that.
What it is.
Yes, no, it's a good question. And it's an important question because there's a lot of misconceptions. A lot of people think like Pilates and yoga is the same thing, and it's not saying one's better than the other, they're just different. So Pilates really is all about the control movement of the body. So like originally when it was created by Joseph Pilates, it was called contrology. It was all about the core and precise movements that all start from the core, like the powerhouse of the body, and moving all the extremities starting from the core.
Yeah.
And to define that, because I also think that's important. People think the core is like just your abs. Like you're working your core, you're just working your abs. But your core is actually from your shoulders down to your pelvis. So it's your shoulder girdle, and it's all the muscles, on your trunk. It's your hips, it's your glutes. It's all of that is part of your core. So the focus of Pilates is the core. So you're basically using your own body weight as your assistance. Focus is on the core, but then we incorporate the balance, the flexibility and stability, and all those other great things that help build a strong foundation.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. I've never taken a class, and I've walked by a room and you see
the machines,
and I'm like, is that exercise or is that something else?
Torture. Yeah, no, I know. It is really scary. And that's the other, that does scare, because we do both at my studio. We have machines and we do like the mat Pilates that's just on the mat. But yeah, it can be really intimidating because the machines they look scary, and a lot of them look like torture devices. So it can be scary walking by. And the other part, I always say this, we have a window you can see when you walk by the studio, like people looking in, when you're looking and watching people in the machines, you're like, they're not doing anything. Like they're laying down, like moving their legs. Like it looks so simple, but it is so much more complex than it looks, which is why I love it, because it's just tricky. But it's such a good, I mean, I like the balance too with the machines and with the mat. So like with the mat work, you're obviously just using your own body. When you're on the machines, you have springs that are different resistance. And so you can use it as resistance, like to make things harder, or you can use it as assistance. Like a lot of times we get people coming in like for rehabilitative reasons, or we have one woman who comes in that has tremors from Parkinson's, and we have one lady who has kind of like some like dementia type things. So it's like good for like, motor skills and like rehabilitative type stuff too. So it really does have a lot of functions.
So you're able to adapt and adjust based on what the individual is.
Absolutely. Totally. Which is the great part. And again, like I said, we have football players that come in and they want to work out and they want to work hard. And so it's totally adaptable and, can be adapted to any level, any body. Yeah. Hmm.
I love that. And I like the part of like kind of, I'll say destigmatizing some of it, because it really is something that, one, how important core is.
Yes.
And I didn't realize it, honestly, as much as I've been working out, like it's shoulders to hip basically. And how important that is, especially now with all the technology, sitting and driving all the
Yes.
time.
Yes.
Now with the phones, you got the
Yes.
hunchback going on.
Yep.
And that contracting, it's like we're all turning into a bunch of C's.
Yes. Yes. Got the hunchback. I know. Yes, it's true. Yes.
So when it comes to, supporting your clients, like, is there, I'll call it, barriers to entry that you see consistently that maybe we can speak to here on lowering that barrier to entry, right? What are the stigmas or things that people you often might see, whether it's walking to the studio or with your nutritional clients, some of those consistent barriers. Does that make sense?
That's like keeping them from doing the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the nutrition part, I feel like, most of the people I work with, they're dealing with one or more autoimmune issues and just chronic things, right? And so I think for the most part, the thought is like, well, I've tried everything. Like, I've done everything. I've been to all the doctors. I've done all the meds. I've tried, I've been to this nutritionist. I tried that diet. They're like, have exhausted all options. So most of the time when they're coming to me, most of the time, I mean, I would say probably 90% of the time, I'm like the last resort. It's like, this is it. Like, I'm putting all my chips in, like, this is it. So it's like, they've tried everything.
Oh, Mary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I get it. And there's a sense of frustration too. And I deal with this a lot too, is because they've tried everything, they come in, at some point they're like, okay, they have a little bit of hope, like, okay. But then there's some point where they're like, they just want it now. And then there's that frustration that comes, sometime during the protocol where they're like, because, to backtrack, the healing journey is never linear, right? It's like sometimes you go 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 4 steps forward, 2 steps, you know what I mean? It's never a linear process. And it's hard when you're in it to see it, because you're like, oh, it's doing so good. And now I feel like crap. And so that's the other part is, there's that frustration that comes along the journey where it's like, well, I thought I was doing good and now I'm not, like, it must not be working. And it's hard. The mindset is probably the hardest piece, to like keep the mindset in the right place throughout the journey, because it is a journey. And like, I have to teach them, like, even like after our time together, like there's never a destination. Like your health is never a destination. Like there's always going to be something to work on and something to, deal with or whatever. So it's, just having, it's really a mindset piece that has to come into play and to really hone it, which is why I always incorporate like mindfulness stuff into it with, meditation and breath work and journaling and that kind of thing, because you have to incorporate the mind into the whole, to the whole equation.
Yeah. And it's almost recalibrating, resetting your expectations of what success is, and
totally
managing through that.
Yep, exactly.
I'm in a group of men that, when we talk around this general topic a lot, is like, how do you know how much to apply and not apply, or is this appropriate, or is it not? Is it yes to all of it? It's challenging.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a good point that you're saying, like, setting expectations, because I have to say that I had a conversation with my clients last week, and that same conversation, she's like, I felt like I was doing good. And then all of a sudden she had this flare up, and, it lasts for days, and she's frustrated and, whatever. And that's kind of the conversation I'd have, where it's like, okay, let's like take a step back and let's look at the little wins. Like, hey, your anxiety isn't debilitating. You remember when you couldn't even like take your kids to school because your anxiety was so bad? Like, you do have to really have to take, shift your perspective and kind of like you said, kind of change your expectations. And it's going to be, most of the time, not all the time, sometimes there's the big wins, but a lot of times it's just these little tiny wins along the way that you'd eventually add up to the big things. But it's not like these huge, jumps across the board when you're on the path.
That's a great point. And it's kind of that you have to take the pause and look back and see the progress, because it's so incremental, you don't necessarily notice it in the moment. Like
exactly.
And but then you realize you're actually like 3 feet higher than you were before. It just feels the same.
Yep.
And that's a hard part to come to grips with, is
For sure.
it's always going to feel the same. You're just stronger and better at dealing with the loads.
Exactly. And that's the whole thing too, is that resiliency that you're building along the way. Is another thing we work on a lot. Is I do a lot of nervous system work, and that's the whole thing, is, building resiliency in the nervous system is what helps you be able to bounce back. So yeah, maybe you have a flare up every now and then, but now your nervous system is stronger and more resilient, and your flare up lasts just 1 or 2 days instead of like 3 weeks. It's just building that resiliency in the body to be able to bounce back. Because that's the other thing too, is talking about, keeping expectations realistic. Like, things are going to happen. Like, life's going to happen. You're going to have traumatic, stressful events that happen in your life. Like, that's life. It's just, how is your body going to deal with it? Like, what is that resiliency in your body to be able to deal with that, for you to be able to bounce back after that event happens?
Yeah, and that's a great point. And it goes back to one of your other points on mindset too, is like, once you realize you're stronger, that when it does happen, how much the mind plays in the healing process.
Yep. You can handle it.
Right. So then, and it's probably impossible to test, but how often the negative perspective probably elongates whatever the situation is.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. It totally 100% changes it. I don't know if this is like going off on a tangent, but it reminded me, because I'm listening to his book. I don't know if you know Dr. Joe Dispenza, but he talks about that a lot. And like, they measure brain waves and stuff, and how people, there are case studies, and they follow them when they're doing their meditations, and then some traumatic thing happens and they stop their meditations, and now they're like, their mindset's totally shifted, and it totally changes like the brain waves, like in the patterns in their brain. So, it literally changes things when your mindset changes, like on a, biological, physiological level.
Yeah. No, I've not heard that. I'll have to check that out. No, I'm familiar with Joe Dispenza and a fan, but yeah, I'll check that one out. And I, sticking on the mindset thread, it's amazing how much that plays, and some of the things that we bring, the limiting beliefs that we've convinced ourselves of. That are simple barriers, and it's like the success isn't as far as it appears. It's almost like the rearview mirror, right? What does it say?
Yes,
objects are closer than they.
Yeah, totally.
It's like almost the opposite of that.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and actually, I just had a conversation the other day on another interview about this, because I think the other part too is we limit ourselves. Like, we think like, oh, this is as good as it gets, when it doesn't have to be. And I hear that a lot too, with you're talking about, what barriers to entry of people coming in is. I get a lot of people that they're like, well, maybe this is just it. Like, maybe I just have to live with it. Maybe this is just, it is what it is. Because, and a lot of it too is because that's what they've been told. Because doctors are telling people that, like, oh, you just learn to live with it. Like, no, you don't have to learn to live with it. Like, you don't have to limit yourself like that.
Yeah. Or at least certainly not stop and find out what the limit is.
Absolutely.
Right. And if they happen to be right, at least you did the due diligence.
Exactly.
Went all in to find that line.
Yep.
And if that's the line, that's the line.
Right.
And to work through that.
Right. Exactly.
So what are some keys to success that you have found for clients? Is there like a top 1 or 2 or 3 things that you would point to encourage those listening to kind of keep in mind?
That's a good question. I think the number one thing, I say this a lot, and my clients probably get tired of me saying it, but I think the number one thing really is awareness. I think body awareness is like, it's crucial. Because first of all, we can't change things we're not aware of. So there's the first thing, like, you can't change what you're not aware of.
Right.
But 2, a lot of times you don't even realize how crappy you feel until you make yourself aware of it. Like, one of the things I have my clients do when they're filling out, their whole intake thing, and it's super long and intense, but I make them fill out a food journal. And it's not so much so I can like, let me judge everything you ate. Like, it's not like that, but it's like, okay, let me write down what you eat, but I want them they tell me how they felt before they ate, how they felt after, what their stress level was, how their body responded. Like, they're answering all these things. So it's not just like, what did you eat? But and the whole goal really is to build this sense of awareness. And It's
Our
funny
body
because
awareness.
exactly. When they first start, like the first day they feel it, it's always super vague. It's like, I felt hungry, I felt full. Like it's very basic. And by the end of it, they're like, these long drawn out answers. I had one client tell me one time, like, I feel like I'm in therapy. It was like writing all the, I felt this but they realized like, oh, okay. I did feel stressed before I ate lunch, and it's because my kid did this, and then I was stressed about this. And like they're connecting dots. And then to go later, I had this anxiety attack and I was super bloated because, well, yeah, your food can't digest because you were super stressed when you were eating.
Yeah,
They're
you
able to
locked up your insides.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So they're able to connect the dots, and it builds that body awareness. So I really feel like first and foremost is that body awareness piece. And I encourage like everybody listening, just do it for yourself. Like keep a, 4 or 5 day journal. And it's not just what you ate, but it's how you feel. It's how you felt before. It's how you feel after, and be able to connect dots, and you understand how you feel, how food makes you feel, how eating at certain times. Maybe you're
Yeah.
eating, you're scarfing down your lunch, which I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that, but you're scarfing down your lunch while you're at your computer, and then your stomach's all kind of like gurgly and bubbly later. It's like, yeah, like you didn't give yourself time to like be
Yeah.
mindful about the food and enjoy the food and let it digest properly. Like, so it really, the awareness piece is huge. I think that's like number one tip is just build body awareness within yourself. And I think the other part of that is it helps you tune into your intuition, because I'm also a firm believer that your intuition plays a huge part in your health and in your wellness and just your overall well-being. And when you're not in tune with your body, I mean, how are you going to listen to your intuition? So
Right.
your intuition is going to, I mean, your body's going to tell you what it needs if you take the time and you make the space to listen to it. So I think, creating the space for that, making
Mm.
space for that can be really powerful.
Those are great points. I really like that because I know for myself, I can relate 100% to your first point on the awareness piece. Is like, think somewhere in the lot culturally, we're just like, oh, we eat food, and this is how you feel, and
Yep.
that's you just go about.
That's it.
You don't question why. All right,
Yep.
feeling full and bloated are two different things.
Yep.
If you feel like you need a pin,
Yes.
you probably have a problem.
Totally.
But that they're like almost synonymous, or you just ignored it, or I did for myself for years, and
Yep.
then uncovering some things in my journey. I think that's a great point, and
Yeah.
really just becoming aware that there's a cause and effect to
Mhm.
everything you do, and then not to
Absolutely.
make it burdensome, but
Right.
just
Yeah.
recognize things have responses.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think it's like women, especially, I feel are, and I know men are guilty of this too, but just because I work with mostly women, I just see it, I see it more often. But I think we're just, we're taking care of everybody else. And then it's like, you either feel like A, you're playing the martyr, what's like, oh, I can't take care of myself, or B, you're just not thinking about it because you're taking care of everybody else and you have kids and, spouse or partner, whatever. But it's especially for women. And I find this a lot too with women, because women, we run on a 28-day cycle, right? Hormonally, those
Right.
premenopausal. And that's been huge too, is helping women like track how they feel, because, I have women who have, migraine flare-ups or headaches, or their RA flares up at certain times. It's like, once we've been able to like, have them track things. Okay, let's track when your flare-up is, see, what you ate, within 48 hours before that. Let's see what day in your cycle you are, like, in that, being able to track those things too, so that they're prepared. And then we can also pick up things like, okay, there's clearly some estrogen things going on, because when your estrogen is at its highest in this week of your cycle, this is happening. So it really does help you be able to connect dots to things and be able to like at least get closer to the root cause of things, and you're able to track things and connect dots, and be aware of what's going on in your body.
So let me ask you this. So to that point, is there a better how to deal with life, as in like food, or because you have the fluctuations, your body's going to respond to things differently? Are there ways to adjust how you live life to kind of help support it, rather than like, you mentioned headaches. So women
Yeah.
can get headaches during the menstruation cycles and such, that instead of, I want to say, just laying on the couch like you should,
Yeah.
headache.
Yes. Yes.
But I'm
Yes.
saying, is there a way to help that other than popping an Advil?
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. And that's such a good question. Because yeah, there's totally, and I mean, there's lots of ways you can live. Like there's all, and I like now that it's happening more often, that there's women who have dedicated their lives to like cyclical living and helping women know how to live with their cycle, because there is. And with me, I'm not so much doing it hardcore like they are, but there are ways. Like, for example, I have a client that we found she starts having these flare-ups right in the middle of her cycle around like the ovulation period. Well, I had suspected that she might have like some histamine intolerances, and
Hmm.
doing some research and stuff, I realized that when your estrogen is at its highest, you're more sensitive to histamines. So, okay, let's adjust your diet when you're around that part of your cycle, and let's eat, she has the list of high histamine foods. Let's avoid these foods during this week of your cycle. And then let's see how it goes. Lo and behold, things are changing. So it's totally possible to be able to work things out around your cycle. Same thing when it's like, a lot of flare-ups happen around the menstruation periods. Your progesterone's dropping, your hormones are kind of like wacky during that period. Well, it's like, okay, you're going to need more sleep. You're going to need more rest. Let's like lay off the high intensity exercise this week. Let's drink more water. Let's eat more like magnesium rich foods to help. Like, so there's so many things you can do to be able to work with your body and change things up. And with women, I think this is going down a tangent here, but I think this is another important thing, is that women's bodies are built so much differently than men that we
Yeah.
really aren't meant to follow diets like men are. And, I get so many women that come into my world and they've done keto and they've done intermittent
Mm.
fasting. And those are probably the big two. They've done all the other diets too, which, okay, that's fine. They have their benefits. But what women don't know is those, first of all, keto wasn't made as a diet. It was to help epileptic kids with epilepsy. But for intermittent fasting, all the research and the numbers and the statistics on like the benefits, it was done on men. The studies weren't for women at
Yeah.
all. So these numbers don't translate. Men are not, they're on a 24-hour cycle. We're on a 28-day cycle. Like, it's totally different. Our
Right.
hormones need different things at different times of the month. So women have to be mindful that these like fad diets they're following, like, it's really not conducive to how we are hormonally.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that before, and obviously I'm not that familiar with that, but personally, but yeah, the yeah, just the acknowledgement of
Mhm.
all those things are into play,
Right.
and I guess that even ties into the expectations. It's like, if and kind of create this if this then that, I guess, scenario,
Yeah. Yeah,
how to
for sure.
better respond and at least
Mhm.
have a better experience than laid up on the couch and feeling easy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
You touch on one thing that, again, I can't relate, but I can, as a husband, I'll call it the mom guilt, in like taking care of yourself and
Yep.
like really getting that, uh, or encouraging women to really do that. For how do you manage through that element?
That's a tough one. And that can be a huge barrier too. Speaking of barriers that you asked earlier, that can be a tough one. And that's a tough one. It typically has to start like super small, like at the like most granular level possible for most women who come to me, because and that's the thing, I get a lot, like, I'm telling them, let's try this and let's do this and let's try to get, maybe you get a monthly massage. I mean, I'm telling all these things and they're, well, I don't have time to do all that. I
Mhm.
have this, and everybody's busy. I get that. But okay, so let's start smaller. That's usually where we are. Let's start smaller. Okay, maybe you have 10-15 minutes in the morning before your kids wake up or whatever. Can you get up, 10-15 minutes a little earlier, and
Mhm.
you have time to, get on your bike or your treadmill, and you have those 15 minutes to yourself. Maybe you can do your meditation and your journaling and have like kind of your mindfulness time to yourself. So it's typically starting really small and starting there and incorporating these little pieces. Because I think a lot of times we tend to overcomplicate, and we think we have to set aside like this gigantuan amount of time towards,
Right.
the self-care. It's not really about that. It's about the little things you do. Because what is self-care? It's really just taking care of yourself. That's all it is. It doesn't have
Yep.
to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be frou-frou. It doesn't have to be anything, complicated. It's just taking care of yourself. So, meditating and journaling and walking and working out, all of those are just taking care of yourself. You don't have to set aside a 45 minutes to an hour to do a whole long workout if you don't have the time. And I sometimes have found that the women who are setting aside, they do 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, 20 minutes here, they get better results than the women who want to set aside that full hour, because
Yeah.
they've been able to do it consistently throughout the day. So they're really more active throughout the day. So I think it's kind of shifting your perspective on that whole self-care thing. And it's not complicated or frou-frou, or it's just taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And and there has to be a point where there's a conversation with yourself, because a lot of times there's like some self-worth stuff too that has to be worked out. You have to have a conversation with yourself, like, and ask yourself, like, why should I take care of myself? Like, okay, well, you have kids, there's your reasons that you need to take care of yourself. You have a
Right.
husband, you have a partner, you have, like, there's another reason you should take care of yourself. Like, so it really comes down to like acknowledging why I'm doing this, and then just kind of shifting your perspective a little bit on what really it means to take care of yourself.
Yeah. And I like what you said around, you mentioned the word consistency in that 15-minute get out and get something done.
Yeah,
Because last I checked, one is greater than zero. And so,
totally.
get out there. And I can relate to some extent on the whole, like all or nothing,
Yes, yes.
as a runner, I get up late and I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to run whatever. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I can't. So I just go to work or whatever.
Yep. Yep.
Instead of getting in when I can,
Something. Yeah,
and then at least it's incremental gain.
for sure.
And that's really when we're talking about all of this, it's longevity.
Absolutely.
We're really talking around longevity, not, we don't have a game to show up for generally.
Yeah. Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a long game.
So Hope, have I missed something that is a key point that you'd want to share with folks, or any parting thoughts?
I think really my biggest advice and like parting words is really, it comes down to that awareness piece. I think that's always my biggest advice, which I know is kind of like not exactly like strategic tangible advice, but it really is the best advice, because you can do all the things, and you can hydrate and drink the water and eat vegetables, and but you hear that stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it all comes down to like building that awareness piece and tuning into your intuition. And then two, the other piece of advice that I would give is, if it doesn't feel right, then it's not. And I get that so much because I work in, with the people I do, and they have so many chronic things. They've been to doctors who just kind of brush them off, or
Yeah.
their quote labs don't show anything. Their labs come up normal. Well, I don't feel normal. And so that's my advice too, is that's the awareness piece right there. You're aware, your body is aware that it doesn't feel normal. If it doesn't feel normal, then it's not, like something is wrong. So I always ask people to speak on that and go find somebody who will listen. Talk to somebody like near you that's, trained in functional nutrition, that can look at it from a different perspective, but just using your intuition and that self-awareness piece to just like keep looking for answers until you find it, till you feel like we're here to be well.
Okay.
Like we are here to feel well. Like your
Absolutely.
body was made to be well.
Right.
If it doesn't feel well, then you keep looking. Yeah, keep looking for answers. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's great insight on, you have to be your own chief advocate at the end of the day.
Yep. Exactly.
And if you're feeling off, there's a reason for it, and at
Mhm.
least acknowledge and understand why.
Yep.
It's great insight. So I like to close things out though with a couple personal questions, nothing heavy, bit of a hot seat, but what are you reading right
Actually, I'm reading Dr. Joe Dispenza. I've read all of his books, but I'm rereading all of them, and they're all amazing. So if you want to go find, Becoming Supernatural is probably my favorite, but all of Dr. Joe Dispenza's books.
now? Okay. Anything Joe Dispenza. Okay.
Yep.
What are you listening to right now, be it music or podcast?
Let's see. I kind of cycle through. I don't have like one podcast I listen to all the time. I have like a bazillion in my like shows that I follow. So
Yeah.
right now, I'm really into human design right now. And so I've been listening to a few that are like specifically on human design.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Mhm.
All right. What's your go-to rest and recovery method?
Infrared sauna. Love it.
Big fan.
Hmm.
That's my favorite as well.
Hmm.
Do you have one in your house, or?
No, gosh, I
Yeah.
wish. That's like the goal. No, there's a place that's not too far from here, and they do other cool things. They do like cryotherapy, and they have
Okay.
like
Yeah.
injections and like all kinds of cool recovery stuff. But I go there, and it's close, and so yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I've got a buddy of mine who has one not far from me.
Oh,
as
that's
well.
awesome.
So yeah,
So nice.
that's kind of how I got even started down some of this
Mhm.
paths, was learning about some of those modalities. But
Yes, it's so beneficial. I love it.
yeah, it's my favorite one by
Mhm.
far. Well, Hope, thank you so much for your time, your insights, and what you're doing in San Antonio there. And I appreciate your time and insight.
Thanks so much, Scott.